My name is Samuel Peterson. I have a master's in oral biology and I'm a doctor of dental medicine. I'm an Idaho native and I practice in the Treasure Valley. We moved back to Idaho 2 years ago after completing dental school and practicing back east for a time. One of the reasons we decided to come back to Idaho was the obvious shift happening in American politics. We knew we wanted to be closer to family and we knew we wanted to be closer to freedom. I know we are not alone in this. 9 out of 10 new patients I see on a regular basis tell me how they chose Idaho for a very specific reason. They could have gone anywhere in the country, but they chose Idaho. They chose Idaho because Idaho means freedom. Idaho means family. Idaho means the right to worship. Idaho means the right to protect yourself. Idaho means helping your neighbor when they need a hand. Idaho also means mind your business. Idaho means the opposite of martial law, the abuse of emergency powers and medical mandates. If politicians and businesses don't protect people's rights here in Idaho, the economic boom and subsequent tax revenue that the state has been enjoying will grind to a halt. People will stop coming here. In fact, people will start leaving Idaho and they will move to places like Florida or Tennessee or South Dakota, where individual rights to choose are being protected. That is really what people want anyways, the freedom to choose. The narrative says if you don't consent to this vaccine, you need more information to overcome your vaccine hesitancy. These nurses and doctors are literally the most educated swath of the U.S. population and thereby possibly the world on topics of health, nutrition, and disease. Who else in the world is equipped to make an educated decision about their choice when it comes to allowing an experimental drug into their bodies? They are reading the data that continues to come out as responsible clinicians do. They are informed and they still don't consent. Instead of strong-arming them into compliance, perhaps we should look at their argument, the data, and allow open discussion and dissent. Are scientists and doctors still allowed to read the data and disagree, debate, retest, present evidence, and pivot when new information is presented? My next question is, what is the difference between prescribing a medication and mandating one? It appears that private businesses are being allowed to require someone to take a medication, and yet a doctor or a PA or a dentist would never be able to mandate that their patient take a medication. They can recommend a medication, they can prescribe a medication, but they cannot force the patient to take it. Does being a private company these days equate to having an honorary medical degree? Are private corporations implicitly granted a DEA license? Is having your own corporation the equivalent of being a sovereign nation where anything the dear leader says is the law? Do the mandates of these micro-dictatorships supersede the laws of the republic? If it is solely up to the business owner, can a private business mandate that their staff take ivermectin prophylactically? What's the difference? If I were to write that blanket prescription for my entire staff and send it to the pharmacy, I would be getting a call back with an earful from the pharmacist. I could even be reported to the board because it falls outside of my purview. And yet we have people that are not prescribers, that are not healthcare providers themselves, that are not bound by the Hippocratic Oath, that are not accountable to an oversight board or liable for damages, mandating prescriptions for an entire population of people that are informed enough to say no. The politicians have given themselves and these corporations blanket immunity from lawsuits because it was approved during an emergency. So the individual has no legal recourse for any ill effects or damage that may happen. Instead, the message is, it is your patriotic duty, your social responsibility, and for the greater good. You must comply and bow to this unprecedented and relentless peer pressure. The situation we find ourselves can be illustrated by what I like to call the buffalo paradox. In ancient America, it was a native practice to incite fear among a herd of buffalo to initiate a stampede. The natives would then pursue and steer the herd toward a cliff or ravine where the buffalo would ultimately fall to their death and their meat and bones and hides could be harvested. Now imagine being a buffalo in that herd as you charge across the prairie evading your predator. A new threat rises on the left, so the herd banks to the right. The threat rises on the right, so the herd banks left. I'm sure you would be frightened, but perhaps also comforted by the security you have in numbers. After all, you are surrounded by your friends, your family, your herd. And together this isn't the first threat you have escaped. But as you turn a corner, you catch a glimpse of something in the distance. It's a cliff. You look to your right and to your left, and that's when it dawns on you. The cliff is your destination. You call out to others in your herd, but they don't see the danger ahead, only the immediate threat behind them. You tell them to stop. You beg them to turn. It's no use. They call back. It's too dangerous to stop. Stick with the herd. There's safety in numbers. You now have a choice, and this is the buffalo paradox. If you break from the group and turn to the right or left, you could be trampled by your own herd, and the offending members of the herd would mock you as you fell beneath their hooves. If you stop, you could be trampled by those behind you, and if you survive, you would still have to face the hunters pursuing you. But to press forward with the herd means your certain demise. One of my favorite quotes that perfectly sums up my perception of 2020 until now is the quote from the book Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by Charles Mackay, who said, "Men, it has well been said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one." Charles obviously knew a thing or two about history, and history, as we know, repeats itself, and it is repeating itself now. There have been many examples throughout history where people in groups have lost their mind, but never has it been on such a global scale where the entire human family, the entire human herd, has gone mad. More and more doctors testify of the benefit and success of early treatment, including Dr. Peter McCullough, the most published doctor in the U.S. on the subject of COVID-19. Clinicians implementing his early treatment protocols have seen tremendous results, but fear still permeates the herd. They are not listening. Interestingly, Dr. McCullough was in support of the vaccine initially and vaccinated a large portion of his patient base, but now speaks out against it because the new data has shown that the risk factors are too great to ignore. But science and reason have been abandoned and replaced by medieval superstition, as fear over a virus with a survival rate that should be celebrated has stirred up the herd into an all-out stampede. Some people in the herd are so terrified of the threat behind them that they threaten the buffalo that sees the cliff ahead. "Don't you dare break ranks," they cry. "There is safety in numbers." But the buffalo that sees the cliff ahead, the buffalo that sees the medical apartheid, the excessive conflicts of interest, the censorship of doctors and scientists, the vast overreach of government, the collusion of corporate monopolies, the censorship of verifiable injuries, and the destruction of individual medical freedom and bodily autonomy, as well as the execution of a worldwide Nuremberg-level experiment on the entire human population, that buffalo who sees the cliff turns and says, well, what does he say? What he says is your choice, because that buffalo is you. Do you stop and make a stand, risking being trampled by your own herd? Do you break and turn to your right or left, risking losing your job or ability to sustain your own life and that of your family, risking friends and family relationship, your station in your community, your very reputation? Do you risk making a stand for your freedom, knowing that you may not survive that stand, knowing that it could be your own herd, your own family, your own kin, your own employer that tramples you into the ground? If you survive the herd, you still have the hunters on your heels, but you have seen the cliff ahead, and you know where this stampede ends. To knowingly turn a blind eye to it is willful suicide. The others in the herd still haven't seen the cliff ahead. They still think they are fighting for their life. They think they are fighting for your life. And they are angry at you for doubting the fact that there has always been safety in numbers. But the herd has lost its collective mind, and the only path back to freedom and safety is to make a significant course correction. There are people, educated and informed people, that are standing up to the herd. There are people that are being trampled by it too. But I have to think that as each person makes their stand, it is enough to give pause and perhaps courage enough to others in the herd to then choose to do the same. So if you are like me and find yourself trapped in the buffalo paradox, remember to be brave. Your life, your individual autonomy, your freedom depends on it, and so does the freedom of the herd, even if they don't know it yet.